Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. A lot of folks hit me up with a clip of Mr. Francis Buckley talking about what mastering is and wanted me to weigh in and respond. So I'm going to do something that I don't usually do on this channel. I'm going to do a reaction to what Francis Buckley said. Little quick aside from that, Mr. Buckley is an excellent audio engineer with an incredible resume behind him, so all of my disagreements here are said with the utmost respect, but I do think that there are a few things that I disagree with and also a few things that I agree with. So let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Mastering is the art of getting sound onto vinyl.
Okay, I know this is a quick place to stop it, but his first statement is mastering is the art of getting sound onto vinyl. I disagree with that. Mastering comes from the art of getting sound onto vinyl, getting a 2-track tape to then transfer over onto a vinyl recording. However, the art of mastering has progressed as technology has progressed, and that art became getting the translation from the tape to a cassette tape, from the tape or ADAT to a CD, or from a digital file to a CD, or to simply create the best digital lossless file possible, which is where mastering tends to land today. So I would say it's a nuanced thing, but mastering comes from the art of getting a sound recording onto vinyl, but it is now the art of creating the final copy, the master copy, from which all other copies will be derived, regardless of medium.
That is mastering, my friends. It's not about getting your song sounding loud. It's not saving your mix. It's about getting sound onto vinyl.
Well, if you're mastering my mix, it might be about saving my mix. Yeah, I mean, he's right about that. I would agree. Mastering can be about saving a mix. Sometimes mastering is about flat transferring a mix and creating that as the master. I would say the art of mastering is the discretion of knowing how to save a mix, when to save a mix, when to flat transfer, or when to make small subtle changes, and that it's actually really more about the taste of the mastering engineer that you are paying for rather than the actual process in which they are engaging. But I will say that there is nothing really in the modern day that a mastering engineer does that a mixing engineer is not capable of doing, or that is not within their scope, but the mastering engineer focuses on certain nuanced processes and also brings a fresh perspective to the table. And that fresh perspective and that different room and environment that's been very carefully calibrated, that's for ensuring translation. And also, I would say that part of the skill set of a good mastering engineer is being able to get the record as loud as the client needs it to be with as little compromise as possible. And that is a very nuanced subset skill of things that are done in the mixing process. So yes, there's a huge overlap, but the mastering engineer specializes.
Beginning, we were all mastering engineers because we were cutting to disc, and then tape came along, and now we had a recording engineer. His job was to get it on tape, and then the mastering engineer was going to take it from tape and onto it. So the idea of mastering is to take 6, 8, 10, 12 different songs and make them sound like they go together.
Okay, I completely agree with everything he's saying. First of all, that history is correct. At the advent of sound recording, there was just the engineer, and that was that. And as time progressed, then you started getting new branches of engineers, such as a balance engineer, which was the proto-mix engineer, whose job was to take a multi-track recording and get it down to a 2-track in the best way possible, and the mastering engineer, whose job was to transfer it from one medium to another, and again, do that as cleanly as possible, or to maybe even sweeten the record in the process. And in fact, as time went on, it was the mastering engineers who were making the mix sound even just a little bit better, who were starting to become in demand. As the specs that were required in order to transfer a medium started becoming easier and easier, the mastering engineers who came to the top were the ones who were improving the sound the most along the way. And today, I would say it's so easy to create a master that the whole art form of mastering is, in fact, the sweetening of the mix. But I will also agree that the main thing, the main skill set that really separates a mastering engineer from a mix engineer is the ability to take an entire project and make it cohesive, because that project might be coming from different mix engineers. It's different desks, different sounds, different ideas. So the real separating and defining factor here for a mastering engineer versus any other type of engineer is being able to take that entire collection and make it sound cohesive.
Flowing from one to other. So to me, I don't really see why someone would master one song. Well, I want to get it louder and do it. Well, why don't you do that to your mix? Because here's the complete lunacy of mastering. This is where mastering goes right off the rails. You got to go with me on this. I do my mix. I love my mix. My mix sounds great. I take it to a mastering guy. He does a couple little things and he makes it sound a little bit better. Well, why can't I take that to another mastering guy and have that mastering guy make the master sound even better? And then I can take that master to another mastering guy and have him make that mastered mix sound even better. Where do I stop?
Okay. So I definitely disagree with this. There's a few reasons I disagree. The first is we're bucking up against the law of diminishing returns at a certain point. I have sent my mix out to a mastering engineer and then had that master remastered by another mastering engineer. And I can tell you from experience, the few times that has happened, it has not made it sound better. There is a leap in there, which is that if you're going to take it to one mastering engineer and then to another mastering engineer in which to improve it even further, why go to the first mastering engineer? Something went wrong in that process if it requires two people doing the exact same job to get the result you want. Now, if that's what you have to do, also, you can do that. But that would be very extenuating circumstances because most of the time, if not all of the time, you're not really going to be improving the record. You're just going to be making it different, which it's all subjective anyway. But, that just doesn't seem... Something went awry in that process if you really need to repeat the same job twice. And it would be the same thing as going to a mix engineer and then having another mix engineer mix the mix, right? That you can do it and it has been done, but it's something weird is happening if you're having somebody repeat the same job again. The implication here is that the mastering engineer is not doing anything that the mix engineer can't do or doesn't do. And I would say that that can sometimes be true, but in practical experience, no matter how good I get my mix, a good mastering engineer will find a few ways to improve it and will usually be able to get it to translate to different systems a little bit better and get it louder without as much compromise to the mix as I would create if I was just making the mix loud. The other issue here is that you can roll the ball in reverse and create the same logical issue. Which is to say, if the mix engineer can do everything, why hire a mastering engineer? True, but if the recording engineer can also do everything, and I don't know any recording engineers who are incapable of making a mix, some of them in fact are quite good at it, well, then why hire a mix engineer? But if the producer is fully capable of sticking microphones in front of different sources and recording the sounds, why hire a recording engineer? Just hire the producer to do the recording, mix, and master, right? It's the modern day. Most producers are capable of doing these things. Well, why even hire a producer? I mean, you don't need somebody who specializes in getting sound onto a record. Pretty much anybody can do that with a DAW, so why not just have the songwriter or the artist do all the production as well, right? You can keep rolling it back, and using that logic. And the problem with that logic is that the reason we roll the ball forward is because each person down the line specializes in the skill. You're getting more nuanced in terms of the improvements that are being made, but this formula has been what's been producing the best results for the better half of 60 years now, and there's a reason for it. So I would say the reason why you master one song is because you look at the cost, you look at the benefit, and you say, for my budget, it makes sense to improve this song a little bit more in terms of the sound on record. That's why. So where does it stop? Well, it stops in one of two places. It either stops where you say, this is it. You decide, okay, this is going to be the final, which is what happens between the mix and the end of the master, right? The mix gets approved. So it's been approved now. The reference master has been approved. Everyone is happy with it. And now the mastering engineer goes, yeah, let's make it just a little bit better. Now everyone's already been happy. Now they're even happier. We're good to go. So it's where the art gets abandoned, right? Art is never finished, only abandoned. It gets abandoned at this time that we have agreed over the decades seems to be the best place to abandon it. Or it stops when you run out of budget. Like, that's where it is. I know a lot of producers who do the recording, mix, and master because the budget is not there to start hiring a bunch of other people. So those are the places that it stops.
If I can take a processor and put it across my stereo bus and make my mix sound better, why don't I just take that processor off and make my mix sound better?
I think he meant to say, why don't I just put that processor on and make my mix sound better? And you do. Actually, as a mix engineer, my master bus has processing on the stereo bus. That is a part of mixing. My goal when I'm mixing is to deliver a result where the reference master is so good that it does not need to go to mastering. It could go out the way that it was, and it should perform well in the marketplace. That's my goal. Now, whether or not I always hit it perfectly, that's subjective. I tend to find that a really good mastering engineer generally improves my mixes in subtle but significant ways. Sometimes I get flat transferred, and that's very flattering. That is my goal. I want it so that every record I'm doing is a flat transfer. It just doesn't work out that way. But I think that everybody along the way should be thinking that way. I think that the producer and or recording engineer should be putting the record together so well that their mindset is when the mix engineer gets this, they're going to open the session or pull in the files, and they're just going to go, wow, this is perfect. I don't need to do anything. Guess what? The mix engineer is going to find ways to improve it. For sure. But that should be the mindset at every stage. The arranger and record producer should be working together to say, okay, this arrangement and this construction is going to make the recording translate really, really well. And then they should be taking that and going, okay, this balancing and this bit of processing on the way in and a little bit of post-processing here before it gets sent to the mix engineer, it's going to make it so that the mix engineer's job is easy as cake. And then when I'm mixing, I'm going, that's great. Here's a few ways that you didn't think to improve it, but I can improve it. Now I'm going to make it so that the mastering engineer doesn't have to do anything. And then the mastering engineer goes, yeah, but you know what? Actually, this will make it a little bit better. So yeah, I leave my stereo processing on, and I encourage everybody else to leave their processing on as long as you're happy with it. The only thing I take off is my final limiter. And that's not because I'm opposed to leaving a limiter on the stereo bus. It's because I'm not putting the limiter on the stereo bus to make the record sound better. I'm putting the limiter on the stereo bus to make it loud enough so that when the client is listening to it in their car or on their laptop or wherever they happen to be listening to it, it doesn't sound so much quieter than everything else that they become uncomfortable. It's for their listening purposes. It's to get an idea of the final master. But my skill with a limiter is not going to be as good as what a serious, dedicated mastering engineer can do. So I'm taking the limiter off because I didn't put it on there to make the record sound better. If I did put it on there to make the record sound better, best believe the mastering engineer is getting a version with a limiter, and it has happened before. It's been rare, but if I feel like it's making the actual sound of the record better, yes, the mastering engineer is going to get it with even that final limiter, for sure.
Why do you leave it to your stereo mix? That makes no sense to me. Matt?
Well, I hope it makes sense to everybody else now. Anyway, if you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. If you want to expand your skills as a mix engineer, recordist, or record producer, head on over to Weiss Advice and become a Weiss Advice member where you're going to get access to all my full-length tutorials as well as access to my weekly webinars where we go over actual records that I am actually mixing in real time, or perhaps some of the records that you're working on in real time so that you get practical, hands-on, tacit's the word, tacit experience with working on records. Okay, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians. Sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.